Good afternoon. Welcome to the National Pulse. I'm Raheem Kassam, editor-in-chief of thenationalpulse.com, and we have breaking news this afternoon on thenationalpulse.com. High-level Biden staffers linked again to the Chinese Communist Party, this time via a drone manufacturing firm that is banned by the United States government. If anybody can seriously come here and debate with me in this chair right next to me as to how Joe Biden is not a national security threat, then come on down. The floor is yours. I'll give you the opening salvo. 8 minutes to yourself. No interruptions from me. Joe Biden and the Democrat Party and the staffers that he employs are national security threats. That's a fact. I want to bring in Darren Beattie, Revolver.news here, because Darren, we're often told, hey, you know, the real national security threats come from the libertarian guys or the WikiLeaks guys, the people who are kind of trying to push governments to be more transparent, maybe push them from not starting so many wars. You guys have an amazing interview up at Revolver.news at the moment that I want to jump right into here. Julian Assange's fiance talking exclusively to Revolver. Darren, what did she say?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me, and many congratulations for War Room's tremendous success. I saw that news, and I'm very delighted for you and the whole crew there. So great job.
You are an integral part of that, Darren. Let me pay our thanks back to you. You've been just a star of that show. So no pressure. Let's make this one a star too.
Well, yeah. So there was a very big interview on Revolver.news with Julian Assange's fiance, Stella. And she's a very impressive woman in her own right. And I really encourage everyone, just go to Revolver.news, read the interview yourself, even if you're initially disposed not to like Julian, to think he's a traitor, all the kinds of things that he's called, a spy, whatever.
Right.
Go and read it with an open mind and determine for yourself. The China issue, actually, that you brought up is quite interesting in this regard. And of course, Julian Assange is nowhere near the national security threat of people like John Bolton, Dick Cheney, or Joe Biden, all of whom in their own ways kind of really compromise our own national security with their disastrous decisions as to, how to deploy America's national security resources.
Darren, hang on, because I've got you for 2 blocks, right? So we can take our time over this, and I think it's really important that we do, because what you said there will sound incendiary to some people. Hold on, John Bolton, Dick Cheney, people who have served their own governments and served their countries as public servants are national security threats. But I agree with you, but I want to unpack it a little bit. I mean, they have brought war to the United States. They have brought war and death to others. They have brought death upon U.S. soldiers. They have cost people trillions and trillions of dollars in total. I mean, just expand on that a little bit.
Right. I mean, in politics, there's this thing called political capital. And I think on the national security stage, there's military capital. That is to say, you want to optimize the use of our military force and our soldiers, the best resources we have, the bravest people we have, and they're going to fight whenever they're told. And we need leaders who will only ask them to go and fight and make, in many cases, the final sacrifices in instances that are absolutely necessary to the American national interests. And John Bolton has had a long career of vigorously advocating for every military engagement imaginable. If he had his way, we'd be at war with Iran, we'd be at war with Venezuela, we'd be at war with Russia, we'd be at war with China, all these countries simultaneously without any sense of prioritization. That is to say, it's totally.
Some people might prefer a war than buying their voting systems, but I agree with you. I had to have my own kind of mea culpa moment over being lured into the neoconservative trap way back when in London, and originally opposing the Iraq War, then buying into it. Further on, which actually a lot of people didn't go into it later, and then realizing, albeit too little, too late, that this was a terrible thing, not just for the Western world, but for humanity in general, and what it says about us as human beings, that we can allow these things to continue in our name, on our dime, time and time again, with nothing to show for it. But there's a reason. There's a reason we're talking about national security at the top of this show. We could be talking about so many other things, but we've got the breaking story up on the National Pulse right now. You've got this exclusive interview with Julian Assange's fiancée. And again, I have to say, I have not always been an Assange fan. I've been an outspoken critic about that. And now I'm looking at it, not knowing where to stand. So I'm hoping, Darren, we can win some hearts and minds, and that you can win mine on this one, because a lot of people look at what happened with Julian Assange and go, well, if you play the game, and you got to take the blows along with it. But as the interview says, and it's a wide-ranging and detailed interview, as the interview says, there are just so many falsehoods and lies and repetitious, ludicrous claims that have been made about Assange that people like me, once upon a time, just read the headline on the BBC.com and went, "Oh, bad dude, yeah, should be locked up in prison." Darren, we'll come back to that. I want to get into those details after the break. We've got to go take a quick break here. Darren Beattie, Revolver.news. Make sure you go in the break. Go to Revolver.news. Load up that lead story of theirs. It is Julian Assange's fiancée sits down with Revolver to reveal deep state's plot to erase our First Amendment. We'll be talking about that with Darren Beattie in just a moment. Don't go anywhere except to Revolver. Welcome back to the National Pulse. You don't see, obviously I hope you don't see, all of the things that happen in the break, but I just broke this thing in front of me, this computer, and then I fixed it within about, all that happened within 20 seconds, and fixed it right before coming back. So I want to make sure that we pull up what's on the screen there right now. That's Revolver.news. The story is Julian Assange's fiancée sits down with Revolver to reveal deep state's plot to erase our First Amendment. And we have Darren Beattie of Revolver.news joining us on the line now to discuss this. Okay, so Darren, I apologize for filibustering that last segment, just trying to lay the framework for this. But can you explain to me why people should feel sympathetic for Julian Assange?
Yes, I think there are a number of dimensions of this. First is the kind of First Amendment dimension that has to do with the ability of all of us as journalists to cover stories. And in fact, if you look precisely, there's nothing that Julian Assange did. If what he did was illegal, if he should be arrested, then the New York Times should be arrested for publishing the same documents. So there's really no actual factual difference between what he did and what the New York Times did. And as like the technical details of the case, they're accusing him of basically helping Chelsea Manning, who was his source, hack, when he didn't really do that. What he did was help Chelsea Manning to conceal her identity as she was going about retrieving the documents. And that's an issue of source protection rather than hacking. And if journalists are no longer able to protect their sources, assist them in protecting their sources, then that has very detrimental implications for journalistic practices. What few honest journalists and brave journalists are left from actually doing their jobs. So that's sort of the legal dimension. There's the political dimension, and this is what, frankly, I'm most invested in. And I think all of us on the right, not even on the right, just broader patriots, we've all kind of starting to come to terms with this very disturbing development, which is that we saw how the upper echelons of the deep state and our national security apparatus, we saw their criminality with respect to Donald Trump. We saw how the upper levels of the Department of Justice, the CIA, the whole range
All of
of
it.
agencies, FBI, and these institutions that I think reflexively a lot of us on the right you want to venerate, and for good reason, because if these institutions were functioning properly, they should be respected. But they've become so corrupt, and we're now bearing the brunt of that corruption. And these are the very people that Julian Assange was exposing. He is the number one enemy of the very deep state that declared war on Donald Trump's presidency from day one. And so, just
Do
as
you
a
think
kind of
to them, Darren, to the establishment, does Julian Assange have a similar level of notoriety to Donald Trump then?
I would say he's number two. If Donald Trump's number one, Julian Assange is number two, without question. They absolutely hate him. Every loathsome person wants Julian Assange to rot in prison, from John Bolton to Dick Cheney, the whole, all of the Michael Hayden, a particularly disgusting individual, John Brennan. All of these people despise Assange just as they despise Trump and his supporters. And so I think maybe it's crude or immature, but it's actually meaningful politically. This is how Trump can actually stick the finger to the deep state by saying, look, this is your number one enemy. Well, here you go. I'm pardoning him.
Are there any downsides? Are there any downsides to using a presidential pardon for Julian Assange right now?
I mean, it requires bravery. Look, there are a lot of very powerful interests that would be furious in this. And I can understand from the president's perspective, he's going to face a lot of heat, in the next several months in 2021. I can imagine all kinds of prosecutors salivating on every opportunity to go after him. He needs, all the support he can get. So, look, there would be a political cost in that respect. Julian Assange has very powerful enemies, just like the president has very powerful enemies. But just because something requires courage doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. And Trump has a very admirable track record, I would say, in courageously sticking up to the corruption in the deep state. There's a third dimension I'd like to address as to why
we've got about 2.5 minutes, just for your record.
Okay. And that is the kind of a dimension of moral authority. And this is a really interesting point that actually Stella, Julian's fiance, put to me. And she said, look, if we want to expose the corruption in China, if we want to expose the moral degradation of the Chinese Communist Party in an effort to make sure that America remains preeminent in the 21st century, we cannot afford to relinquish our moral authority. And we relinquish our moral authority by having our government do everything it can to make sure that we have a political prisoner in the form of Julian Assange. So I think a pardon in this respect would really do wonders to restore the moral authority that ultimately we're going to need in this long-term confrontation with China.
Was Julian Assange kind of the first modern sacrifice in the same vein as, you don't decide who journalists are, you don't decide whether or not you do journalism, but the establishment decides who's a recognized journalist or not? I'm a member of the oldest journalism union in the United Kingdom. But they don't recognize me. CNN people will say, oh, I'm not a journalist because I might have a political bent to the way I do things, as if they don't, right? Was Julian Assange the first casualty of that, modern casualty of that mindset?
Well, he was, I wouldn't say he's the first, but he's certainly the highest profile and the most severe case. And you're so right about journalism. Like, the people who are called journalists by the quote unquote journalists, they're actually not journalists. They are neo-Stasi commissars working on behalf of our corrupt ruling class. Anyone who dares in a brave way to expose or embarrass the ruling class, they're not journalists. They're called by those very same corrupt elements. They're called traitors. They're called disinformation agents. They're called all these things. And so there are precious few real journalists left. And I think, just as an issue of symbolism, Julian Assange represents that, and the prospect for that in the future, and the necessity for that if we want to remain a free country going into the 21st century.
Darren Beattie, it's always a pleasure to have you on and have you walk us through this. The story is up right now at Revolver.news. Julian Assange's fiancée sits down with Revolver to reveal the deep state's plot to erase our First Amendment. Go and check it out. Darren, once again, thank you for joining us here today.
Thank you.
All right, when we come back, Bill Gertz is going to join us, Washington Times national security correspondent, author, talk about the Chinese Communist Party and the latest machinations. Be right back. Well, welcome back to the National Pulse. I'm Raheem Kassam, editor-in-chief of thenationalpulse.com. I want to give a big shout out to everybody who's joined us over the last 24 hours on thenationalpulse.com/support. Just membership is exploding there. We have a great group chat in the Discord. It's a private channel. You can join up on thenationalpulse.com/support in several different ways. So go and check it out and join the party. I know so many of you like the live chat in the YouTube and wherever else you do it. This one goes all day long, and I jump in there several times a day. Have fun with a lot of the fun people in there. And you know what's awesome about it as well is they give me a lot of ideas. They help out with what's on the site, what to look into, some of the research. So if you're sitting at home and you're thinking, hey, I have a lot to add, come and add it. Help us out. That would be fantastic. If you just want the live chat, if we can scroll down that page, by the way, if you just want the live chat access, you go to thenationalpulse.com/support. Under those 4 top tiers that you see there, keep going down, you can see there's one little bar and it says, hey, if you want to just join the Discord chat group, there you go. And that's $5 a month. Speaking of money, I just had to get something off my chest about this stupid bailout, $600, not even rent for some people, right? And I mean real people. Appalling, absolutely appalling, 5,500 pages of legislation that people haven't even read in full, and credit, by the way, to people like Congressman Gosar, who are turning around and saying, heck no, we are not supporting this trash bill with pork in there for Venezuela, Pakistan, just handing taxpayers money and the next generation and the next generation and the next generation's money away for social justice programs in Pakistan as part of a bill, as part of legislation that is supposed to alleviate the burden on the US taxpayer for what the US government is doing to them. There is no other way to describe this, and I apologize, but a shafting. Let me just roll through that again in case you're not angry enough about this. I really believe this is one of the things to get angry over. The US government, your politicians, shut down the economy. And you remember, it was 14 days to stop the spread or slow the spread. Then it became 30 days to slow the spread. And I got that. And I think a lot of the country got that. You don't know what this virus is. The Chinese Communist Party aren't playing ball, not telling us enough. Better we just take a beat, figure things out. Fine. Got that. Advocated for it and feel right about doing that. What I don't feel right about is being naive about how much power the government would take and how long they'd lord it over us for, because we, out of goodwill, complied. Maybe we shouldn't have. Maybe we gave them the wrong idea. Maybe we gave them all the latitude they needed to be tyrants. It's, I guess, the human condition. Somebody gives you power, not only do you use it, you find a way of solidifying that power for permanent power. And this has now become the permanent power hanging like the Damoclean sword over our necks. They have armies out, you know, Antifa, BLM armies out now. Fear. People getting screamed at in Washington, D.C. Where's your mask? You step outside your house for 2 minutes without a mask on. I'm not kidding. I've seen it. And they have this power, and they keep this power now, and they shut down the economy, and they keep shutting it down. Look, I know most of you don't live in Washington, D.C., but I'm going to talk about the place I know. Mayor Muriel Bowser is shutting down indoor dining again tomorrow in Washington, D.C. And then they write the bill that's supposed to alleviate this problem that they have foisted upon us for months and months, and that they're pledging to run into the new year. More shutdowns for ordinary businesses. You notice it's not the big chains going out of business. No, they get the cash in that bill, just like Pakistan does. So they shut it down, and then they write the bill. And the bill says illegal immigrants can now have some cash, more cash actually, than citizens can. Foreign countries get the cash. Expensive colleges get the cash. What do you get? You get to pay yourself $600 minus the vigorish that some government apparatchik puts in the back pocket. That's what's happening. I am stunned that this country is taking it. I'm not surprised my country is. I'm not surprised at what's going on in the United Kingdom. I tried to warn people about Boris Johnson. I tried to warn people about Daniel Hannan, MEP, fake Brexiteer, pseudo-conservative, who, I'm going to say over 10 years ago, probably now, wrote an article saying, oh, well, the House of Lords, the upper chamber in the United Kingdom, load of crap, filled with people who don't know how to do anything. Needs reform, shouldn't be packed with political appointments like this. Daniel Hannan was just appointed to the House of Lords and accepted a role there, accepted a peerage. The frauds are all around you. I try and point them out as much as possible. And they come down on us like a ton of bricks when we do, but we will keep doing it because that's what we do here. That's why the National Pulse is already surpassing its record month. This month already. We're not even in the last week of the month because I know you know what's going on out there, and I know you want the truth. And that's what we'll keep doing and keep watching the watchers. I had to get that off my chest about this appalling bill, the bill that President Trump absolutely must veto for any sense of credibility. Be right back after this break. The road to serfdom is not actually paved with good intentions at all. No, I'm increasingly convinced that our betters are actually pretty evil people. Now, I don't mean a handful of them, and I don't mean the people right at the top. I am increasingly convinced that the lot of them who would have more government, stupid spending, I believe they're trying to destroy us at this point. I never wanted to believe that. Nobody ever wants to believe that people who go into public service, that they're all that way. And I don't mean feckless, I don't mean reckless, I don't mean just crap and bad at their jobs. I mean evil incarnate. Also stupid incarnate. Sometimes. I want to take you over to the laptop, right over here. I just tweeted something, and it really kind of made my day. Let's load this up here. Okay, so I saw this. There's this actually very funny account. It makes fun of people on the left and on the right. It's called Journalists Posting Their Own Losses, right? And it basically goes through journalists' dumb tweets, of which there are many, many. And we got this one. I mean, this is a real gold mine right here. So Susan Hennessy right here is of CNN. She's a CNN legal analyst. Let's not talk about the other CNN legal analyst, Jeffrey Toobin, who posted his own D, let alone his own L. So Susan Hennessy's in her house, in a room in her house, and the door is closed. And so she tweets, "So a spring must have snapped in the doorknob. Okay. And I am now fully stuck in my bedroom. It is a weird antique knob. So, does anybody have ideas? Small mercy, my kids are on the other side of door and happily fetching me snacks while the grown-ups brainstorm." Okay, well, if you're getting snacks, then you're not part of the grown-ups brainstorming, are you? That's really embarrassing. That firstly, you can jimmy that open very, very easily. But there's more. There's more. Just wait. There's more. That's really embarrassing. And the fact that she was in there long enough to need snacks. What is happening to these people? Let's find out. Okay, it goes on. "For those concerned, my husband is home and watching kids." Okay, great. Your husband's home. So presumably your husband would be able to open the door. Beat down the door if he... Oh, it's a CNN woman's husband. Not going to be strong enough to beat down a door, is he? Not going to be strong enough to beat down a Ryvita packet. Thanks to an amazing friend who saw this tweet. She's tweeting, and one of her friends saw her tweet, and that's how she figured out, "I now have a contractor who specializes in old houses on site. He also cannot open it, but is trying to talk me through disassembling the hinges. I cannot do it. This is now fully humiliating." You should be fully humiliated. This is somebody who's got a law degree. I assume. I assume CNN legal analysts have law degrees. They don't just have their pants down on Zoom calls. She's got her rhetorical pants down here. Okay, firstly, let's take that back. Okay, thanks to an amazing friend who saw this tweet. You mean to say that she's in there, the kids are sliding, fruit winders or whatever under the door. Snacks, she needs snacks. Snacks for the brainstorm. Okay, so am I belaboring this? I don't think I am. I'm keep going. So she needs a friend to see the tweet. She doesn't actually think to pick up the phone. The husband doesn't think to pick up the phone. Hey, we can't do it. Let's call somebody up. Maybe call granddad. Maybe call, I don't know, anybody. Maybe go next door to the neighbors. You got a screwdriver? We don't have screwdrivers in our soy house. Can I borrow a screwdriver, a flathead, jimmy that lock open? No. We've got to wait till somebody sees my tweet and sends around a contractor who specializes in old houses, who also cannot open the door, but is trying to talk me through disassembling the hinges. Okay, disassembling the hinges. It's a pin. But you can't do it. It's extraordinary who these people are. These are the people who want to run your life, who do run your life. She's at the Brookings Institution, this highfalutin think tank here in Washington, D.C., all these incredibly... Do you know what a think tank is? Yeah, I think people think of a think tank, and go, oh, it must be lots of people, lots of smart people sitting around a table, brainstorming ideas of how to make the world a better place. No, a think tank, and I've worked at a couple in my time, a think tank is a place you go when you want a high salary to attend lectures, conferences, and don't want to go back to university. That's a think tank. A think tank is kind of it's like a halfway house between your gender studies degree and the real world. Except it's not the real world in any way, shape, or form, because all you do is you sit at a desk, tap up a few reports about things that have almost no bearing on anyone's lives, and most of the time people already knew. And then you go, oh, well, the solution to this is obviously more government intervention. There are very few think tanks, by the way, that don't call for more government intervention. Why? Because they build in a cost for themselves in that intervention. Hey, you got to pay the Brookings Institution to do some advertising, or pay the Brookings Institution to hold this press conference on behalf of government, or whatever it is, right? That's how a think tank and the think tank world operates. Okay? Right wing and left wing. That's a think tank circuit. I want to go back to the laptop. Can we go back to the laptop? So Susan Hennessy, after all of this, says, they're now trying to rescue me via ladder. Our neighbors are watching. My husband cannot stop laughing. Yeah, I'm sure your neighbors can't stop laughing at your husband either. I mean, do these people have no shame? They're now rescuing her from her window via a ladder because they can't open a door. How many CNN, I'm going to steal a tweet I saw earlier. How many CNN journalists does it take to open a door? None. They're not journalists. They're activists. I just thought I'd bring you that little bit of amazing for your day today. Thank you, Susan, for being an absolute total moron. These are the people that run your lives. We'll be right back after this short break. Now let's bring on someone from a think tank. But this think tank actually does want government out of your lives. It's one of the very few that does. The Center for Immigration Studies just does a magnificent job of trying to make sure that we get back to some semblance of normality in this country as regards immigration, and lowering immigration, lowering the cost of immigration to the ordinary citizen. It is a total novelty to find people like that in and around Washington, D.C. and in policy circles. I want to bring in Andrew R. Arthur. He is the resident fellow in law and policy at the Center for Immigration Studies. Art, thank you so much for joining us here today.
Thank you for having me, Raheem. I greatly appreciate it.
By the way, I mean, you know, I ding think tanks. I've worked at think tanks myself in the past, but I'm not entirely wrong about the majority of think tanks in Washington, D.C., which basically exist to subsidize themselves, right?
Oh, absolutely. And, you know, it is one of those things where, you know, particularly in the field of immigration, there are a lot of different think tanks. We refer to ourselves as comparable to the best hockey team in Ecuador. We may not be good, but we're the only ones who do what we do because we're one of the few that actually calls for enforcement of the immigration laws and for a reasonable immigration policy that benefits the American people. And Raheem is going to benefit the immigrants themselves.
Well, I mean, I don't know how far you want to get into that conversation, but that's a point that's very close to my heart because, you know, I wrote a book called Enoch Was Right, and the book was about Enoch Powell, this British politician who I'm sure you're aware of back in the 1960s, who was trying to say a certain thing about immigration, but the political establishment was so stupid that they didn't understand his classical literary reference, his classical Virgil reference about making the immigrant's life easier as well. You know, the Rivers of Blood speech by Powell wasn't actually talking about literal rivers of blood due to immigration. It was talking about what the prophet Sybil in Virgil's Aeneid said to the immigrant, that you will shed much blood to immigrate to a new country, and was saying, hey, basically, you know, just know you're in it for the long haul. There's going to be no quick fixes here. There will be strife. There will be struggle. There will be all this kind of thing. And you look at Susan Hennessy over at CNN, and it all kind of just falls into place with what you said about being one of the only low migration voices in the entire discussion in Washington, D.C., and the stupidity of the establishment themselves that they didn't get Powell's reference. Now they don't even know how to open doors. Right? So I know that's a tangent to what we're supposed to be talking about here, but you kind of, I mean, anything to add on that before we actually get to the point of the interview?
No, I think you covered that pretty well.
I appreciate that. Yeah, by which, Andrew, that's the very diplomatic way of saying you talked a lot there, Raheem. I want to direct the audience to the article on my screen here by it's the Chinese intermediaries launder cartel drug proceeds in the United States from the U.S. to China to the cartels. Andrew, let's walk through. Sorry, Art, I know you prefer Art. Let's walk us through this, if you would.
Yeah, it's actually very interesting. If you read the latest national drug assessment from the DEA, they talk about how these Chinese organizations are helping to launder Mexican and Colombian drug money in the United States. And it actually relies a lot upon the closed Chinese banking system. Very briefly, what happens is individuals in the United States collect up drug proceeds from those who sell States to send back to the cartels, and they will go to Chinese businessmen who are here in the United States. They will give them the cash, and almost simultaneously, money will be transferred between two banks in China, between the account of the person receiving the cash, less about a 10% margin, and to the bank of the individual who is actually running the drug laundering scheme. Once that money makes the bank in China of the person who's running the drug laundering scheme, that money is then taken and given to individuals who are working in Mexico, primarily Chinese businessmen who are working in Mexico. The money will be transferred to them, and they will pay an appropriate amount in Mexican pesos. And that money is then transferred over to the Mexican drug cartels. So it is, Raheem, if you're familiar with the Hawala scheme, which came to the fore after September 11th, it's a way of transferring money from one country to another without the money ever actually leaving the country, because there are individuals who, have debts in the foreign country or want to transfer money over to the foreign country. You give money to somebody in the United States, money never leaves this country, and it goes abroad.
That's absolutely extraordinary. I mean, has this, just as a kind of aside to this, has this, do you think, been covered at the national media level with the intricacy and the detail that you just explained to us in?
No, actually, it hasn't. And, for what it's worth, Raheem, it was very interesting when I read it in the National Drug Assessment, which is published by the DEA annually. I wasn't 100% sure what they were talking about. They didn't go into great detail about it. And then up popped the case of Zhanbang Gan, who was the individual who was convicted of laundering about $500,000 plus in illicit drug proceeds in this country for the cartels. He himself fish business. He exports jellyfish to China from Guadalajara, Mexico. And so it's very important to understand why this is a necessary thing to do. Drug laundering is one of those things that really isn't understood very well. If you've ever seen Office as we're running the scheme, actually have to look up the definition of money laundering in the dictionary to figure out what exactly it is. But moving cash across the border, and keep in mind, cartels deal in hundreds of millions of dollars in cash, is a very iffy proposition. Cash is heavy on currency going across the border. And so if there is a low cost, and this is actually very
Hey, just hang on, because we're up against a break here. Let's just hold you over. We also got to fix the line a little bit. We're dropping a few too many words here, so it's a little bit harder to follow. Let's reset that line. We'll go to a quick break. We'll come back. Andrew R. Arthur is the resident fellow in law and policy at the Center for Immigration Studies, really enlightening us on what's taking place on America's borders and here in the United States. We'll be right back. So NASA scientists apparently, I mean, this is according to the Mail Online, so take it with a pinch of salt, take it with a salt shaker. Frankly, NASA scientists achieved long-distance quantum teleportation over 27 miles for the first time, paving the way for unhackable networks that transfer data faster than the speed of light. Seems like a pretty big deal. It was just thrown in front of me just now on my screen. I thought I'd report it to you. Welcome back to the National Pulse. I want to bring Andrew R. Arthur from the Center for Immigration Studies back with us. So walking us through this Chinese intermediaries launder cartels drug proceeds in the United States story that they have up at CIS.org. I want to make sure that everybody knows to go to that website, because it's not a typical DC type of think tank. They actually bring real news to people. In fact, I just want to click on, I'll lead you over here to Art's page on there. And you can see, if you scroll down, it's daily news updates of important things, especially as regards immigration and immigration stories. So this isn't just a bunch of eggheads sitting around trying to figure out how to make themselves some more money off the taxpayer dime. Andrew Arthur and the CIS guys I've known for a long time, the CIS guys, and have always been just incredibly potent a force in the low immigration debate. Art, welcome back to the show. I just wanted to make sure that we got a great new connection with you here. And I wanted to also ask you about some of the other stories that you've been covering, if I may. Specifically, the one that jumped off the page at me was New York barring ICE from courthouses.
Yes, New York State passed a law, the legislator late law, Governor Cuomo signed it, which bars ICE agents from going into New York courthouses and making arrests. And Raheem, it's important to note, they don't just bar them from going in, they threaten them with criminal penalties if they actually go in, including contempt, lawful imprisonment if they are to attempt to effectuate an arrest in a New York courthouse. It's really a shocking story because the only reason that ICE goes into those New York courthouses is in order to criminals. They're not there to arrest witnesses or family members unless they have criminal records themselves, but they're there to arrest criminals and get criminals off the streets of New York and out of the United States. But for some reason, the Empire State now considered to be a crime. So it's an exceptional story. And here's the worst part, Raheem, is that the only way that those ICE agents are going to be able to go and arrest those criminals is to arrest them on the street or to go to their residences. And actually, I was in North Carolina about 10 days ago when a police officer was killed in one of these uncontrolled encounters. This one was at a car wash. But, that's the sort of danger that New York wants to expose ICE agents to for whatever reason. It's based on erroneous impression of what ICE does and what the Trump administration has done with respect to immigration. There are actually fewer, about 1/4 as many deportations from the interior of the United States last year in FY 2019 as there were in FY 2000 under the Obama-Biden administration. So, the media has whipped up this frenzy about what Donald Trump does with respect to immigration, and then the legislatures feed off it to endanger our ICE agents.
It's absolutely extraordinary. Well, Art, we're really grateful for your time here today, walking us through those stories. There's a lot of noise out there at the moment. There's a whole country that's going through things where things are happening, they're not getting reported because, of course, the other news networks want to focus in on, Jonathan Swan's reporting at Axios that Trump is mad, and meanwhile there's actual things that impact people's lives that are going on, and we're so grateful that you guys over at CIS.org are following them along. Where can people follow you specifically as well, Andrew? CIS.org/Arthur. And as you said, I think we've lost the line in total with Art there, but I think he was going to say CIS.org/Arthur. You can catch up with all of his work. It's absolutely fantastic. Stay abreast of all of the detail as it pertains to immigration and how it affects ordinary people. Share their stories. Donate to them if you like. I want to just walk you through before we go here. I want to walk you through some of the stories that we have over at thenationalpulse.com right now. We can throw it over to the laptop as well. We've got the high-level Biden staffers story, consulting for the CCP-linked drone company DJI. Now, we've written about DJI before, and in fact, Congressman Gates has talked at length about DJI and the drone systems and the implications, the Chinese trying to force and foist upon law enforcement in the United States their drones that they can use, I mean, they can use that company whenever they want. Article 7 of China's national security law basically means that any company or individual can be requisitioned by the Chinese Communist Party. So, and I'm sure the Chinese Communist Party has absolutely nothing nefarious in mind when it gives away drones to US police forces. Yeah. I want to draw your attention as well to a couple of the other stories Natalie Winter's been breaking over at the National Pulse. We had that exclusive yesterday about US tech executives attending the Chinese Communist Party group's conferences. But it's this group that we were talking about yesterday that actually peddles the disinformation, or peddled the disinformation, well, it continues to, about the CCP virus, the coronavirus. And the big tech executives not only just went, Mark Zuckerberg and those types, they spoke there at these conferences. The group that runs the 50-cent Wu Mao army does conferences alongside the big tech oligarchs, which ban you and me, won't ban Chen, whatever his name is, the guy in Brussels for the Chinese Communist Party, their ambassador in Brussels, right, who just abuses Secretary Pompeo, Nigel Farage, and President Trump, harasses them on social media against Twitter's own healthy conversation rules. Oh, but they can't ban him because they go to his conferences. Sorry. Yeah, there you have it. All right, stick around. David Brody, Water Coolers up next. We'll see you again tomorrow at 3 p.m.